Two arrogant riders mocked a World War II memorial ceremony, but their biggest mistake was disrespecting the wrong female Navy SEAL, a mistake that would expose a nationwide veteran memorial theft ring and teach them an unforgettable lesson about respect. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from. If this story of justice and respect for veterans resonates with you, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow we have another powerful story of karma coming your way. The autumn breeze carried falling leaves across the granite pathways of the Arlington Memorial Plaza, as Commander Rebecca Steele Morgan stood silently before the wall of heroes. Her calloused fingers traced the engraved name of her grandfather, a World War II veteran who had saved his entire platoon at Normandy. The plaza, nestled in the heart of Virginia's rolling hills, had become her sanctuary since retiring from active duty after 16 years of distinguished service in the Navy SEALs. The morning sun cast long shadows through the memorial's towering columns, creating a cathedral-like atmosphere that demanded reverence. A small group of elderly veterans had gathered for their weekly ceremony, their weathered faces bearing silent testimony to sacrifices few could understand. Rebecca watched as they carefully arranged flowers and photographs, their trembling hands straightening medals and flags with practiced precision. Thomas Wheeler, the 85-year-old caretaker of the plaza, and himself a Korean War veteran, approached with his familiar shuffling gait. "Another beautiful morning for remembrance, Commander," he said, his voice carrying the weight of decades. Rebecca smiled, noting how he always used her rank despite her insistence on first names. To Thomas, showing proper respect was as natural as breathing. The plaza had been Thomas's life's work since its inauguration 30 years ago. Every polished stone, every carefully maintained garden, every meticulously preserved artifact told a story of sacrifice and courage. Rebecca had chosen this place for her own healing, finding solace in its quiet dignity after missions that would never appear in any history book. Sarah Chen, a local historian working to document veterans' stories, was setting up her recording equipment nearby. She had become a familiar face at the plaza, capturing the fading memories of World War II veterans before they were lost to time. Her dedication reminded Rebecca of her own mission specialist from her SEAL days, thorough, passionate, and fiercely protective of the truth. The morning's peace was about to be shattered in a way none of them could have anticipated. None of the gathered veterans, not Thomas with his decades of service, not Sarah with her historical knowledge, not even Rebecca with her extensive combat experience, could have predicted how the next few hours would transform this sacred space into the front line of a different kind of battle. What started as a simple act of disrespect would unravel a conspiracy that stretched across multiple states, involving the systematic theft and desecration of veteran memorials. The immaculately maintained Arlington Memorial Plaza was about to become ground zero in an operation that would require all of Rebecca's training, experience, and tactical expertise. But in these quiet moments, as she stood before her grandfather's name, Rebecca was simply a granddaughter honoring her family's legacy. Her SEAL tattoo, partially visible beneath her rolled-up sleeve, caught Thomas's eye as he worked nearby. The old caretaker had no idea about the nightmares that still woke her in cold sweats, or why she always positioned herself with clear sightlines to all entrance points. The gathered veterans began their ceremony, their voices carrying clearly in the morning air as they recited the names of fallen comrades. Rebecca stood at a respectful distance, her military bearing evident in her straight posture and alert eyes. She cataloged details with practiced precision: the number of visitors, the positions of security cameras, the blind spots behind the memorial walls. Through the elegant wrought iron gates, two motorcycles roared into the parking lot, their engines deliberately loud enough to disrupt the solemn ceremony. The veterans paused their recitation, several flinching at the sudden noise. Thomas's face darkened with concern as he gripped his cleaning tools tighter. The riders' leather jackets bore patches that marked them as members of a local group known for their disruptive behavior. As the warriors of yesterday continued their ceremony, none could have guessed that they were about to witness a confrontation that would expose a criminal enterprise targeting the very symbols of their sacrifice. The morning sun continued its climb, illuminating the names of thousands who had given their lives for freedom, unaware that their memorial was about to become the staging ground for justice. Little did these riders know that their choice to disrupt this sacred space would lead to their worst nightmare: a face-to-face encounter with someone who had spent years defending the very freedoms they were so casually disrespecting. Their actions were about to trigger a chain of events that would remind everyone why you never, ever disrespect those who served, especially not in front of a Navy SEAL who had dedicated her life to protecting the values these memorials represented. Two reckless riders skidded their motorcycles into the parking lot of Arlington Memorial Plaza, the sacred stillness of the autumn morning shattering under the roar of their engines. Commander Rebecca Steele Morgan watched from her position near the Wall of Heroes, her trained eyes scanning the newcomers. After 16 years as a Navy SEAL, she could spot trouble before it announced itself. The white marble expanse of the memorial stretched before her, each polished stone telling the story of sacrifice and courage. Rebecca had chosen this place as her sanctuary after retiring from active duty 6 months ago. The familiar weight of her concealed Sig Sauer P-226 pressed against her side. Old habits died hard, especially for someone who'd spent their career expecting the unexpected. Thomas Wheeler, the 85-year-old caretaker of the plaza, stood nearby meticulously polishing a bronze plaque. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision, each motion a testament to his 30 years of dedication to maintaining this sacred space. As a Korean War veteran himself, Thomas understood the importance of preserving these memories. "You know, Commander," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of experience, "in all my years here, I've never seen the disrespect growing like it has lately." He gestured toward a recently repaired section of the memorial wall. Third act of vandalism this month. Different perpetrators each time, but somehow feels connected. Rebecca nodded, unconsciously adjusting her position to maintain clear sight lines to all approaches. The plaza's layout was etched in her mind. 3 main entrances, multiple points of cover, clear fields of fire if needed. The tactical assessment was automatic, as natural as breathing after years of operations that would never make the history books. Sarah Chen, the plaza's historical curator, emerged from her office carrying a stack of documents. At 32, she'd dedicated her career to preserving veteran stories, though lately her work had taken a darker turn. Her radio crackled with Ghost Team's update. "Transport 3 minutes out. Enemy teams moving to intercept positions. They're good. Professional entry tactics, counter-surveilla. More reports came in this morning," she told Rebecca, her voice tight with concern. 3 more memorials hit last week: Portland, Denver, and Atlanta. Same pattern: vandalism followed by theft of historical artifacts. Rebecca's mind cataloged the information, fitting it into a pattern she'd been tracking. The incidents were too coordinated, too professional to be random acts of disrespect. Her former team commander had taught her that coincidences in their line of work usually weren't. The morning sun cast long shadows through the memorial's towering columns as more visitors arrived. A group of elderly veterans gathered near the eternal flame, their medals glinting in the early light. Every Thursday, they conducted a remembrance ceremony, reading the names of fallen comrades and sharing stories that needed to be preserved. Dr. James Harrison, their unofficial leader, and a distinguished Service Cross recipient from Vietnam, caught Rebecca's eye and nodded. She'd earned their trust over the past months, though they knew nothing of her service record. To them, she was simply the quiet woman who stood guard during their ceremonies, her respect evident in her bearing. A gentle breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass and late-blooming roses from the memorial garden. Rebecca had helped Thomas plant those roses, each one dedicated to a different unit that had served with distinction. Her own unit's rose, a deep crimson variety, bloomed near her grandfather's name on the Wall of Heroes. The plaza's security cameras swept their predetermined paths, their coverage supplemented by the new system Rebecca had helped design. After the third vandalism incident, she'd convinced the memorial board to upgrade their security. Her experience in counterterrorism had taught her the value of proper surveillance. Maria Valdez, the plaza's groundskeeper, worked quietly among the memorial stones, her careful attention to detail matching Thomas's own standards. She'd started working at the plaza 3 months ago, but something about her movements caught Rebecca's attention. The way she scanned her surroundings spoke of military training. The morning's peace was momentarily interrupted by a police siren in the distance. Officer David Chen, Sarah's brother and a regular presence at the plaza, patrolled the perimeter in his cruiser. He'd been instrumental in investigating the recent vandalism cases, though his hands were often tied by jurisdictional issues and lack of evidence. Rebecca checked her watch. 0900 hours. The remembrance ceremony would begin soon. The gathering veterans straightened their uniforms, a habits ingrained decades ago that never faded. Their quiet dignity stood in sharp contrast to the growing disrespect that seemed to be spreading across the country's memorial sites. The plaza's visitor center opened its doors, Lisa Martinez beginning her shift at the information desk. She'd lost her father in Desert Storm, and like many who worked here, she considered the plaza more than just a workplace. It was a testament to sacrifice, a bridge between generations, a reminder of the cost of freedom. Thomas finished polishing the plaque and stepped back, his arthritic hands trembling slightly from the effort. The name he'd just cleaned belonged to his best friend, lost in Korea. Sometimes, he said quietly, I wonder if people today understand what these names really mean. Each one is a story of courage, of sacrifice, of someone who gave everything for others. Rebecca understood all too well. Her own stories, the classified operations, the teammates lost, the battles fought in shadows, they were part of a continuing legacy of service. She touched the sealed trident tattoo on her forearm, a reminder of the brotherhood and sisterhood she'd been part of. The morning continued its peaceful progression, but Rebecca's instincts told her something was different today. The two riders in the parking lot hadn't moved, their presence like a discordant note in the plaza's solemn symphony. Their leather jackets bore patches she didn't recognize, and their attention seemed focused on the elderly veterans rather than the memorial itself. Her phone vibrated, a message from her former intel officer. Patterns matching your memorial vandalism cases showing up in 6 more cities. Something bigger at play. Watch your 6. Rebecca deleted the message, her mind already gaming out scenarios. Whatever was coming, this sacred ground would be ready. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal just how deep the conspiracy against America's memorials ran, and remind everyone why disrespecting those who served was never wise, especially not in front of someone who had dedicated their life to protecting what these memorials represented. The morning's peaceful rhythm shattered as 2 figures swaggered into the plaza, their boots scraping against the hallowed granite. The taller one, sporting a leather jacket with crude patches and a swagger that screamed trouble, pulled out a half-empty beer can. His companion, shorter but equally arrogant, lit a cigarette, deliberately flicking ash onto the memorial's polished surface. Rebecca watched them through narrowed eyes as they approached the gathering of elderly veterans. Their body language spoke volumes, shoulders squared aggressively, exaggerated movements designed to draw attention, the kind of false bravado she'd seen countless times before. The taller one, whom she mentally tagged as Swagger, had a spiderweb tattoo on his neck. His friend, Ash, wore steel-toed boots that had clearly seen more bar fights than honest work. Thomas Wheeler's hands tightened on his cleaning cloth as he watched them approach. The elderly veterans at the Eternal Flame paused their preparation for the ceremony, several instinctively drawing closer together. Dr. Harrison stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between the troublemakers and his more vulnerable comrades. "Well, well," Swagger called out, his voice carrying an edge that made several visitors flinch. "Look at this, buddy. Got ourselves a real-life museum of old-timers." He took a long drink from his beer, deliberately letting some spill onto the memorial stone. "Hey, Gramps, you actually fight in the big one? Or just play dress-up with those medals?" Rebecca felt her combat instincts surge as she watched Dr. Harrison's face tighten with controlled anger. The Distinguished Service Cross recipient stood straighter, his weathered features maintaining dignity despite the insult. Before he could respond, Ash laughed and flicked his cigarette directly onto a fresh bouquet of flowers laid at the base of the Wall of Heroes. "Seriously, man," Ash sneered. "All this for what? Bunch of names on a wall? Way to waste prime real estate." He reached out to knock over a framed photograph of a fallen soldier, but Thomas's voice stopped him. "Young man," the elderly caretaker said firmly, stepping forward despite his arthritic limp. "This is a place of remembrance and respect. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." His voice carried the quiet authority of someone who'd faced far worse than two drunk troublemakers. Swagger's face darkened as he turned toward Thomas. "Or what, old-timer? You gonna make us?" He moved closer, using his height to loom over the elderly caretaker. "Maybe we don't feel like leaving. Maybe we think this whole setup is a joke. What are these guys supposed to be heroes of anyway? Ancient history?" Sarah Chen had already pressed the silent alarm, and Rebecca could see Officer David Chen's patrol car turning into the plaza's entrance in the distance. But the situation was escalating too quickly to wait for his arrival. Ash had pulled out his phone, recording their confrontation while laughing. "Hey, social media, check this out," he called out to his phone's camera. "Gonna show these heroes what we think of their little garden party." He reached for one of the veterans' displayed medals, but before his fingers could make contact, Rebecca moved. 16 years of SEAL training took over as she crossed the space in 3 fluid steps. Her hand clamped down on Ash's wrist, applying precise pressure to nerve clusters that made his fingers spasm open. The phone clattered to the ground as she spoke, her voice carrying the kind of authority that commanded immediate attention. "That Medal of Honor," she said quietly, "was earned by a man who threw himself on a grenade to save his entire unit. I don't think you want to touch it." Her grip remained firm as Ash tried to pull away, finding himself locked in position by someone who clearly knew exactly what they were doing. Swagger spun around, beer forgotten as he faced this unexpected intervention. "Let him go, bitch, or we'll—" His threat cut off as Rebecca's eyes met his. Something in her gaze, the look of someone who had dealt with far worse threats in places few could imagine, made him take an involuntary step back. "You'll what?" Rebecca asked, her voice still measured, but carrying an edge that made both troublemakers suddenly very aware of their situation. "Because from where I'm standing, you have 3 choices." She released Ash's wrist with a subtle twist that sent him stumbling back toward his friend. 1. You both leave now. Apologize to these gentlemen, and we forget this happened. She shifted her stance slightly, and both men unconsciously recognized the movement of a trained combatant. 2. You try something stupid, and I demonstrate exactly why that would be a poor decision. Her eyes flickered to the SEAL trident tattoo visible on her forearm. Or 3. We wait for that police car that's about to pull up, and you can explain to the officer why you're harassing Medal of Honor recipients at a Memorial Plaza. The 2 men glanced at each other, their earlier bravado evaporating as they realized they'd severely miscalculated. But Swagger, perhaps unable to accept being faced down by a woman, made one final mistake. His hand moved toward his back pocket, where the outline of a knife was visible. "You don't know who you're messing with," he growled, trying to reclaim some authority in his voice. "We're part of something bigger than this stupid memorial. You're going to regret—" Rebecca's movement was too fast for the tourists filming the confrontation to properly capture. One moment Swagger was reaching for his knife, the next he was face down on the granite, his arm locked behind him at an angle that promised immediate consequences for any resistance. Ash took a step forward but froze as Rebecca's voice cut through his uncertainty. "The knife in his pocket is illegal length for this county," she said calmly to the approaching Officer Chen. "And I believe threatening violence at a national memorial is a federal offense." She maintained the hold with practiced ease, noting how Swagger's patches matched descriptions from other memorial vandalism incidents. The morning sun continued its climb over the plaza as Officer Chen began reading rights and applying handcuffs. But Rebecca's mind was already racing ahead, connecting dots. "Something bigger than this memorial," Swagger had said. Her phone buzzed with another message from her former intel officer, and she knew this confrontation was just the beginning of a much larger operation. The elderly veterans had resumed their positions at the eternal flame. Their ceremony would continue undisturbed. But as Rebecca watched the troublemakers being led away, she knew this was far from over. Sometimes the biggest investigations started with the smallest disturbances, and these 2 had just given her the first thread to pull on what promised to be a very interesting operation. The Arlington Memorial Plaza's security office was a small but well-equipped room, its monitors displaying feeds from various angles of the sacred grounds. Rebecca stood watching as Officer David Chen conducted his preliminary interviews, her trained eyes catching details others might miss. Swagger, whose real name turned out to be Marcus Blade Kelvin, sat handcuffed to a chair, his earlier bravado replaced by nervous glances at his phone, which lay just out of reach on the desk. His companion, now identified as Peter "Wrench" Torres, occupied another chair, his demeanor shifting between defiance and fear. Rebecca noticed how his eyes kept darting to specific areas whenever the security footage of the plaza appeared on the monitors. The maintenance access points, the utility corridors, the less visible corners of the grounds. "So, Mr. Kelvin," Officer Chen began, his voice professional but carrying an edge of contained anger. "Want to explain why you were harassing veterans at a national memorial?" He placed a small evidence bag containing the illegal knife on the desk. "And maybe tell us about this?" Rebecca leaned against the wall, maintaining a position that gave her clear sightlines to both suspects while appearing casual. She'd seen their type before, foot soldiers, probably recruited for their willingness to cause trouble but not the real masterminds. Their nervousness suggested they knew they'd stumbled into something bigger than expected. "Just having some fun, man," Blade muttered, but his eyes kept straying to his phone. "Didn't mean nothing by it. Just a couple of bikes looking for a good time." His fingers twitched, and Rebecca recognized the tell. He was waiting for something, probably a message. Sarah Chen entered the office carrying a tablet. "Officer, you need to see this," she said, handing the device to her brother. "I've been comparing their patches to reports from other memorial incidents. The design matches vandalism cases in 4 other states." Rebecca moved closer, studying the images. The patches bore what appeared to be random designs, but her trained eye caught the subtle variations, markers identifying different cells of what was clearly an organized group. Her phone vibrated with another message from her former Intel contact. "Facial recognition hits. Your boys have been busy. Check your secure email." "Listen," Wrench spoke up, his voice carrying a hint of desperation. "We don't know anything about other memorials. We're just independent writers, you know. No connection to nothing." But his hand unconsciously touched one of his patches as he spoke, the one matching incidents in Portland. Thomas Wheeler hobbled into the security office, carrying a worn leather logbook. "Young lady," he addressed Rebecca, his formal manner unchanged by the morning's excitement. "I've been keeping track of suspicious visitors. These 2 match the description of individuals who were asking unusual questions last week about our storage facilities and artifact restoration areas." Rebecca's mind clicked pieces into place. The recent surge in memorial vandalism wasn't random, it was reconnaissance. These 2 weren't just troublemakers, they were scouts, checking security responses and cataloging vulnerable targets. "Mr. Kelvin," Rebecca spoke for the first time since entering the office, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made both suspects straighten involuntarily. "Those patches you're wearing, they're not random designs, are they? They're markers, identifying which cell you belong to, which territory you operate in." Blade's face paled slightly. "Don't know what you're talking about, lady. They're just cool designs." His protest cut off as Rebecca moved closer, her presence somehow filling the small room. "The spider web on your neck," she continued. "That's not just prison ink. The pattern's too precise, too deliberate. It's a map." She watched his reaction carefully. A map showing connection points, probably storage locations where stolen artifacts are held before being moved. Officer Chen looked up sharply from the tablet. "How did you—" "Because I've seen this type of organization before," Rebecca replied, her eyes never leaving Blade's increasingly nervous face. "Military precision disguised as random chaos. You 2 aren't just thugs. You're part of a network, aren't you? Targeting memorials across the country, but not just for vandalism. This is about theft." Wrench shifted in his chair, sweat visible on his forehead. "You don't know nothing," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Rebecca allowed herself a small smile. "Actually, I know quite a bit. Like how your boots are scuffed on the inside edge. Consistent with hours of surveillance work, not bar fights." Or how you both instinctively checked sightlines and exit routes when you entered the plaza. That's not biker behavior. That's military training. Or at least someone trying to imitate it. She picked up Blade's phone, noting how both men tensed. And this? It's not just for recording your pranks, is it? You were documenting security patterns, response times, patrol routes. She turned to Officer Chen. Check their bikes. I bet you'll find sophisticated recording equipment disguised as normal gear. Thomas cleared his throat. Commander, there's something else. He opened his logbook. Last week, these two were asking about our upcoming Medal of Honor exhibition, specifically about transportation schedules and security protocols. The pieces snapped together in Rebecca's mind. The Memorial Plaza wasn't just a random target. It was a test run. These two were evaluating the site's security, preparing for something bigger. Here's what's going to happen, Rebecca said, her voice taking on the tone she'd used during operations. You two are going to tell Officer Chen everything about your organization, every contact, every location, every plan, because right now you're just looking at local charges. But if I have to dig deeper, if I have to activate certain resources. She let the implication hang. Blade's attempt at tough guy defiance crumbled. Lady, you don't understand. These people, they're serious, professional, they'll kill us if we talk. And you think they won't anyway? Rebecca countered. You got caught. You're compromised. Your only play now is to work with us. Officer Chen's radio crackled. David, we found something in their bikes. You need to see this. Rebecca's phone buzzed again. This time the message was more urgent. Network activated. Multiple cells moving. Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon. She studied the two suspects, knowing they were just the visible part of a much larger operation. Someone was targeting America's military memorials, and these two had just given her the first real lead. Make your choice, she told them quietly. But remember, you didn't just disturb some memorial today. You didn't just disrespect a few veterans. You've attracted the attention of people who specialize in dealing with threats to national security. And trust me, you'd rather deal with local police than with them. The morning sun climbed higher over the plaza as Blade and Wrench exchanged glances, realizing they'd stumbled into something far bigger than they'd imagined. Their attempt to scout a potential target had instead led them straight into the path of someone who'd spent years dealing with threats far more dangerous than them. The security office fell silent as Officer Chen returned, carrying a small metallic case recovered from one of the motorcycles. Rebecca's trained eye immediately recognized the sophistication of the equipment inside. High-resolution micro cameras, frequency scanners, and what appeared to be a custom-designed data collection unit. This wasn't amateur gear. This was professional surveillance equipment worth thousands. Found these hidden in compartments under the gas tanks, Chen explained, laying out the equipment. And this. He placed a small flash drive on the table. Already sent copies to the department's cyber unit. Rebecca studied the suspect's reactions. Blade's attempt at maintaining his tough facade cracked further, while Wrench seemed to physically shrink in his chair. They knew they'd been caught with something significant. Sarah Chen had been quietly analyzing the surveillance footage from the plaza's cameras on her tablet. There's more, she announced, turning the screen toward her brother. Watch their behavior before the confrontation. They weren't just walking randomly. They were following a precise pattern, documenting blind spots in our security coverage. Thomas Wheeler stepped forward, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he opened his logbook. Last month, we had visitors from the National Memorial Preservation Society. At least, that's what they claimed to be. They asked similar questions about our security protocols. He flipped through several pages. Their credentials looked perfect, but they weren't real, Rebecca finished, pieces clicking into place. They were advanced scouts, weren't they? She turned to the suspects. Part of your organization's recon team. Blade shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between the evidence on the table and his phone. Rebecca noticed a subtle pattern in his glances. He wasn't just worried about messages, he was watching the time. Whatever operation they were part of, it was running on a schedule. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message from her former intel contact. Multiple cells activating along the East Coast. Pattern suggests coordinated operation. Timeline unknown but likely imminent. Officer Chen, Rebecca said quietly, I think we need to clear the plaza. Immediately. Before Chen could respond, Dr. Harrison burst into the security office, his usual dignified composure shaken. Someone just tried to access the Medal of Honor vault, he reported, his voice tight with concern. The electronic locks registered multiple unauthorized attempts. Rebecca was moving before he finished speaking. Chen, lock these two down and get back up here now. Sarah, start evacuation procedures. Thomas, I need everything you've documented about suspicious visitors. Her SEAL training kicked in as she mentally mapped out the plaza's vulnerabilities. Wait, Wrench called out, real fear finally breaking through his facade. You don't understand. It's not just about stealing medals or artifacts. There's more. His words cut off as Blade shot him a warning glare. Rebecca paused at the door. More what? They'll kill us, Blade muttered. You don't know these people. They're not just thieves. He swallowed hard. There's something else. Sarah's tablet suddenly lit up with alerts. Multiple security cameras just went dark in sections C and D, she reported, and the backup systems aren't responding. Rebecca's mind raced through scenarios. The confrontation with these two wasn't random. It was meant to draw attention, to focus security on a public disturbance while something bigger was set in motion. Thomas, she turned to the elderly caretaker. The Medal of Honor exhibition. When exactly was it scheduled to arrive? Today, he replied, understanding dawning in his eyes. The transport's due in. He checked his watch. 30 minutes. That's what this was about, Rebecca said. These two weren't just scouting. They were the distraction. The real target is the transport. She turned to Officer Chen. How many medals were being moved? 12, Sarah answered instead, checking her tablet. Including 3 from World War II that have never been publicly displayed. The collection's estimated value is, it's not about the monetary value, Rebecca cut in. Think about it. Stolen medals, vandalized memorials across the country. They're not just stealing artifacts, they're trying to erase history, destroy symbols of military honor. Her phone buzzed again. Satellite shows multiple vehicles converging on your location, professional operators. These aren't street thugs. Rebecca checked her sidearm, muscle memory from years of operations taking over. Chen, call in every available unit. Sarah, start deleting sensitive files. Anything about memorial security nationwide. Thomas, get the veterans to safety. What are you going to do? Sarah asked, already moving to comply. Rebecca's expression hardened. These people think they can desecrate what others died to protect. They think they can erase the sacrifices of generations of soldiers. She headed for the door, her movements fluid and purposeful. They're about to learn why that's a very bad idea. A glance at the security monitors showed dark figures moving with military precision through the plaza's blind spots. They were good, professionals trained in covert operations. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had chosen to target a memorial protected by someone who had spent years hunting people like them. One last chance, she told the suspects. Who are they? Blade finally broke. They call themselves the Cleaners. Professional military background, probably ex-special forces gone mercenary. They've been hitting memorials for months, but not just stealing. They document everything first: security systems, response protocols, personnel patterns. Why? They're building a database, Wrench added, his voice barely a whisper. Every memorial, every military museum, every installation that honors veterans. They're not just stealing history. They're preparing to erase it. Rebecca's phone buzzed one final time. Team activated. 6 operators en route. Authority granted. Stop them at all costs. The morning sun cast long shadows through the plaza's columns as Rebecca moved into position. These cleaners thought they were targeting a vulnerable memorial. Instead, they were about to face someone who had sworn to protect everything they were trying to destroy. Sarah, kill the power to sectors E through G, she ordered. Chen, get your people in position but do not engage. These aren't ordinary criminals. She checked her watch. And someone get me the transport's exact route. We're not just defending the plaza anymore. We're hunting them. The cleaners were about to learn why attacking a memorial protected by a Navy SEAL was their last mistake. Rebecca moved swiftly through the plaza's underground tunnels, a network of maintenance corridors few visitors knew existed. Her radio crackled with updates as an impromptu command center formed in the memorial's basement archive room. Thomas Wheeler had revealed that during his 30 years as caretaker, he'd created detailed maps of every passage, every secure room, and every potential tactical position in the facility. Security feed shows 3 teams of 4 operators each, Sarah's voice reported through the comm. They're carrying professional gear, thermal imaging, electronic countermeasures, military-grade weapons. A pause. Rebecca, these aren't just mercenaries. The way they move. They're former special operations, Rebecca confirmed, studying the tablet displaying thermal signatures. Probably a mix of different units, but they've trained together. Watch how they maintain formation even through blind spots. The archive room had transformed into a hub of activity. Dr. Harrison and his group of veterans had refused to evacuate, instead offering their intimate knowledge of the memorial's layout. Among them was retired Master Sergeant Jack Wilson, who'd spent 20 years in Army Special Forces. Recognize some of these tactics, Wilson said, watching the security feeds. Similar to patterns we saw in private military companies operating in restricted zones, precise, coordinated, but with a level of aggression you don't see in official operations. Officer Chen had called in trusted members of his department's tactical response team. Detective Maria Santos, a former Marine, led the group. We've got roadblocks establishing a 6-block perimeter, she reported, but my team's not equipped to handle operators of this caliber. Rebecca's phone lit up with another encrypted message. Ghost team in position. 6 operators, full tactical loadout, awaiting your command. A second message followed. Additional intel. Cleaners linked to systematic attacks on military historical sites across 3 continents. This isn't just theft, it's erasure of military history. Thomas approached with Sarah, carrying stacks of blueprints and security protocols. The Medal of Honor transport will be here in 20 minutes, Sarah said. They're not responding to emergency codes. Communications might be compromised. They are, Rebecca confirmed. The cleaners didn't just scout our security. They infiltrated our communications network. She turned to the gathered group. Which means we need to create our own. Wilson nodded, understanding immediately. Like the old days, hand signals, predetermined patterns, analog solutions they won't expect. He turned to his fellow veterans. Remember how we did things before digital? Rebecca's tactical mind was already formulating plans. Detective Santos, your team has local knowledge we need. Wilson, your experience with special operations tactics is crucial. Thomas, nobody knows this place better than you. She paused, looking at each person. We're facing professionals who want to destroy everything this place stands for. They think we'll follow standard security protocols, react in predictable ways. So we don't, Santos concluded. We change the battlefield. Exactly. Rebecca spread out Thomas's blueprints. They've studied our official security measures, but they don't know about these maintenance tunnels. They're expecting standard police response, not a coordinated defense by people who understand their tactics. Her phone buzzed again. Satellite shows cleaners' backup vehicles moving into position. Estimated 12 additional operators. Heavy weapons spotted. They're setting up a larger operation, Rebecca explained. The metal transport is just phase 1. Once they breach our security, they'll document everything. Every response, every protocol, every weakness. This plaza will become a template for hitting other sites. Sarah looked up from her tablet. Just got confirmation. Similar teams hitting 3 other memorial sites across the state. This is coordinated. Good, Rebecca said, surprising everyone. They're spreading their resources, getting cocky. They don't know we've identified their pattern. She turned to Wilson. Master Sergeant, how'd you like to help set up some old-school surprises for these professionals? Wilson's weathered face broke into a grim smile. Been a while since I've had the chance to really plan a defense. These tunnels remind me of places we used to. Set up kill boxes, Rebecca finished. Exactly. Santos, your team can provide official cover while we... She was interrupted by Thomas. "Commander," the elderly caretaker said, his voice urgent. "The vault. There's something you need to see." He led Rebecca to a hidden door behind the archive shelves. This wasn't in any official blueprint. During the Cold War, they built emergency storage areas. Completely off-grid, no electronic signatures. The vault was small but secure, its walls lined with steel. "Perfect," Rebecca said. "Sarah, start moving critical documents here. Santos will use your official response as misdirection. Wilson, I need you to coordinate with the veterans, set up observation posts using their knowledge of the grounds." Her phone lit up. "Ghost team reports cleaners' advanced elements moving into final positions. Time to target, 15 minutes. Rebecca gathered everyone close. "Listen carefully. These people aren't just thieves. They're trying to erase our military history, destroy the symbols of sacrifice that connect generations. They think they're hunting us, but right now, in this place, with all of you." She looked at each face, seeing determination replace fear. "We're the hunters." Wilson began distributing old-style radio sets from his car, simple, reliable equipment that wouldn't be affected by electronic warfare. Santos's team moved to predetermined positions, deliberately visible, drawing attention while veterans silently took up hidden observation posts throughout the plaza. "Ghost team, maintain distance," Rebecca instructed via secure channel. "Let them think they're in control. Sarah, start implementing the electronic deception plan. Thomas, show Wilson's team the access points you mapped. Santos, keep your response by the book. Let them think they're seeing standard security protocol." The morning sun climbed higher as the impromptu team moved with increasing confidence. These weren't just individuals anymore. They were becoming a coordinated force, each bringing unique skills and knowledge to the defense of something greater than themselves. Rebecca checked her watch. 10 minutes until the transport's arrival. Her phone showed one final message. "All teams in position. Command is yours, Commander. Show these bastards why you don't mess with military memorials." The cleaners thought they were dealing with standard security forces. Instead, they were about to face a coalition of veterans, law enforcement, and special operators united in defending not just a building, but the very history of American military sacrifice. And leading them was someone who had spent years perfecting the art of turning hunters into prey. The sun cast long shadows through the memorial's columns as Rebecca finalized the defense preparations. The basement archive room had transformed into a sophisticated command center, with Thomas's historical blueprints overlaid with tactical annotations. Sarah monitored multiple screens showing security feeds, while Wilson coordinated with his fellow veterans through old-style radio sets. 5 minutes until transport arrival, Sarah reported, her voice steady despite the tension. "Cleaners' teams have maintained their positions, but they're starting to shift formation." She pointed to thermal images showing the professional operators moving with practiced precision. They're creating overlapping fields of fire. Rebecca studied the patterns, her years of SEAL training helping her decode their intentions. "They're not just setting up for the transport intercept," she observed. "Look at how they're positioning their secondary teams. They're preparing for a sustained operation." Detective Santos approached with her tactical team leads. "My people are in position, making sure to look exactly as predictable as they'll expect. Standard police response by the book." She smiled grimly. "They'll never expect what's really waiting for them." Thomas wheeled over a cart loaded with old maintenance equipment. "Found these in the deep storage," he said, revealing modified tools that could serve as improvised tactical gear. Back in the Cold War, they planned for everything. These tunnels aren't just passages. They're a defense network. Rebecca's phone buzzed with updates from Ghost Team. Confirmed 12 primary operators, 8 support. Heavy weapons and reserve vehicles. They're running this like a military operation. "Good," Rebecca said, surprising those nearby. "Military precision means military thinking. Predictable, structured, reliant on technology, and predetermined protocols." She turned to Wilson. "That's why your old-school approach is crucial. They'll be expecting modern security responses." Wilson nodded, understanding immediately. "Digital jammers won't help them against manual signals. Motion sensors are useless when you know every creaky floorboard by heart." He gestured to his fellow veterans, each positioned at key observation points throughout the complex. We spent decades memorizing every inch of this place. Sarah's screens suddenly flickered. They're starting their electronic warfare suite, she reported. Primary systems going dark exactly as we predicted. But her smile showed this was part of the plan. Switching to our independent backup network now. Rebecca gathered her core team for final instructions. Remember, we're not just protecting metals and artifacts. We're defending the physical embodiment of sacrifice and honor. These cleaners want to erase that history. We're going to teach them why that's impossible. And measures. But they don't know what they're really walking into, Rebecca responded. She turned to her assembled force. Veterans who knew every corner of the memorial, law enforcement officers playing their part in the deception, and hidden operators ready to strike from the shadows. Thomas, initiate Phase 1, she ordered. The elderly caretaker nodded, moving to an ancient-looking electrical panel that controlled systems the cleaner's modern equipment couldn't detect. Throughout the memorial, subtle changes began. Air handling systems altered pressure in specific corridors, creating misleading acoustic patterns. Old ventilation fans activated, masking the sound of movement through the maintenance tunnels. Emergency lights cast confusing shadows that played havoc with night vision equipment. Wilson, your teams have green light for Phase 2, Rebecca continued. The veteran operators began implementing their part of the plan, using their intimate knowledge of the memorial's architecture to set up interlocking fields of observation. Detective Santos received her instructions next. Keep your response exactly as they'll expect. Standard containment protocol, visible deployment of tactical teams. Make them think they know exactly what they're facing. Rebecca's phone lit up with satellite imagery showing the transport's approach. The cleaners' teams were moving with textbook precision, their formations perfect for a normal security scenario. But this was far from normal. They're good, Wilson observed, watching their movement patterns. Ex-military for sure, probably special operations background. See how they maintain spacing even while moving through blind spots? Very good, Rebecca agreed. But they're fighting the last war. All their technology, all their modern tactics, they're useless against people who understand the soul of this place. She checked her weapon one final time. They think they're hunting us in our own home. Time to show them their mistake. Sarah's monitoring systems picked up the first signs of the cleaners' electronic warfare. Modern security systems began failing exactly as predicted, but the veterans' analog observation network remained unaffected. Thomas's old maintenance systems, invisible to digital scanning, continued functioning perfectly. Transport 1 minute out, Ghost Team reported. Enemy teams in final positions. They're initiating their electronic countermeasures. Now, as if on cue, the memorial's main power grid went dark. Emergency lighting kicked in, creating exactly the kind of confusion the cleaners would expect. But thanks to Thomas's knowledge of the original systems, the darkness worked for the defenders, not the attackers. All teams execute as planned, Rebecca ordered through the secure old-style radio network. Remember, let them think they're in control. Let them think their technology gives them the advantage. Let them think they know this ground better than we do. The morning sun continued its climb as the transport approached its final turn. The cleaners were about to learn a harsh lesson about the difference between studying a location and truly knowing it. They had their technology, their tactics, their perfect plans, but they were facing people who had spent their lives protecting what this place represented. Veterans who knew every shadow, every corner, every whispered echo of history. Law enforcement officers willing to appear vulnerable while hiding their true strength. And leading them, a Navy SEAL who had made a career of turning overconfident hunters into unconscious prey. The stage was set, the pieces were in position, and in the next few minutes, the cleaners would learn why attacking a memorial protected by those who understood its true meaning was the last mistake they would ever make. The Medal of Honor transport entered the Memorial Plaza's main gates, its security detail following standard protocols exactly as planned. Rebecca watched through thermal imaging as the cleaners' teams responded, their movements precise but predictable. They had no idea they were following a script written specifically for them. "Ghost team, status," she whispered into her secure radio. "All enemy teams committed to their primary positions," came the response. "They're deploying electronic countermeasures exactly where we predicted. Backup units holding at standoff positions." The transport's security team, briefed in advance, played their part perfectly, showing just enough awareness to be credible, but maintaining the vulnerability the cleaners would expect. As they approached the memorial's main entrance, the first phase of the trap began to close. "Thomas, initiate sequence 1, Rebecca ordered. The elderly caretaker activated his modified maintenance systems, and throughout the complex, subtle changes began. Pressure differentials in the ventilation system created misleading acoustic signatures. Ancient backup generators kicked in, producing electromagnetic interference that played havoc with the cleaners' advanced equipment. "They're responding," Sarah reported from her monitoring station. "First team redirecting to investigate the power fluctuations. Second team maintaining focus on the transport. Third team." She paused, studying the thermal signatures. "They're splitting up, Commander, just like you said they would." Rebecca nodded. Professional operators facing unexpected technical issues would follow standard protocol: investigate, adapt, maintain mission focus. But in doing so, they were dispersing their forces exactly as planned. "Wilson, your teams have permission to begin," she transmitted. Throughout the memorial, hidden veterans started implementing their part of the operation. Years of familiarity with every corner of the complex made them invisible to the cleaners' sophisticated surveillance. The first sign that something was wrong came when the cleaners' lead team lost contact with their perimeter security. Professional discipline prevented them from breaking radio silence, but their body language showed growing concern as their technological advantage began to erode. "Ghost team reports enemy communication grid is fragmenting," Sarah announced. "They're switching to backup frequencies, but our interference is forcing them to use shorter ranges." Detective Santos's tactical teams maintained their visible presence, drawing attention exactly where Rebecca wanted it. The cleaners, seeing what appeared to be standard police response, focused their countermeasures on the obvious threat, while the real danger moved unseen through Thomas's maintenance tunnels. "Primary team approaching the transport now," Ghost Team reported. 6 operators, heavy weapons, top-tier gear. These aren't amateurs, Commander." "No," Rebecca agreed, watching their movement patterns. "Former special operations, probably private military contractors. See how they maintain spacing even while dealing with equipment failures? That's advanced training." But training was becoming a liability. The cleaners' sophisticated tactics relied on technology and predetermined responses. As their equipment failed and their communications degraded, they fell back on standard procedures, making them predictable to anyone who understood their methodology. "Second team has cleared the outer perimeter," Sarah reported. "They're moving to secure their fallback positions, but," she smiled, "they're using the routes we prepared for them." Throughout the complex, the trap continued to tighten. Veterans positioned in hidden observation posts tracked the cleaners' movements, relaying information through Wilson's old-style radio network. Thomas's maintenance systems created an ever-changing maze of environmental conditions that forced the professional operators to constantly adjust their approach. "Transport team, execute next phase," Rebecca ordered. The Medal of Honor security detail suddenly showed signs of noticing the surveillance, reacting in ways that would force the cleaners to accelerate their timeline. "They're mobilizing their main force," Ghost Team reported. "All primary operators moving to engage. Backup teams repositioning to cover potential escape routes." Rebecca checked her tactical display, confirming all pieces were in position. The cleaners had committed their forces exactly as predicted, thinking they were exploiting a vulnerable security response. Instead, they had walked into an intricately prepared killing zone. "All teams prepare for Phase 3, she transmitted. "Remember, we're not just protecting medals, we're defending everything they represent. Make it count." The transport team suddenly executed a practiced defensive maneuver, creating what appeared to be a dangerous gap in their security coverage. The cleaners, seeing an opportunity, launched their primary assault exactly as Rebecca had anticipated. "They're moving," Sarah announced. her voice tense with controlled excitement. All primary teams committed to the attack, secondary units holding position as planned. The memorial's main hall erupted in a coordinated assault as the cleaners executed their operation. Smoke grenades deployed, electronic warfare systems activated, and professional operators moved with lethal precision toward their objective. But they were attacking a position that had already been evacuated. The real Medal of Honor transport had been rerouted through Thomas's tunnels minutes earlier, while a decoy team maintained the illusion of standard security protocol. "Ghost Team, you have authorization," Rebecca commanded. "Engage at will." The morning sun cast long shadows through the memorial's columns as the trap finally sprung. The cleaners, committed to their assault, suddenly found themselves caught between veteran observers who knew every angle of the complex and professional operators who had been waiting patiently in the shadows. Their sophisticated equipment, already compromised by Thomas's environmental systems, proved useless against opponents using simple, reliable technology and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Their tactical formations, perfect for modern combat scenarios, became a liability in the confined spaces of the memorial's maintenance areas. "All units, execute final containment," Rebecca ordered, moving to her designated position. The cleaners were about to learn why attacking a memorial protected by those who truly understood its meaning was a mistake they would never forget. The battle for the Arlington Memorial Plaza was about to begin, and the outcome would teach these professional desecrators a lesson about the true meaning of honor, sacrifice, and the consequences of disrespecting those who had given everything for their country. The main hall of Arlington Memorial Plaza erupted in controlled chaos as Rebecca's plan unfolded. The cleaners' primary assault team, believing they were engaging standard security forces, found themselves caught in a sophisticated trap. Their night vision equipment, disrupted by Thomas's modified environmental systems, turned the familiar space into a disorienting maze. "Ghost Team engaging secondary units," came the calm report through Rebecca's radio. "Multiple targets neutralized. No casualties on our side. They never saw us coming." The professional operators' confusion was evident in their movement patterns. Trained to rely on technology and modern tactics, they suddenly found themselves facing opponents who operated on a completely different level. Veterans who knew every creaking floorboard, every acoustic shadow, every quirk of the memorial's ancient architecture. "Lead team is splitting up," Sarah reported from her monitoring station. "They're trying to regroup, but Wilson's people have them cut off from their fallback positions." Her screens showed thermal images of the cleaners attempting to establish new defensive positions, unaware that each move took them exactly where Rebecca wanted them. The first real engagement came when a team of 3 cleaners tried to secure what they thought was a secondary exit. Instead, they found themselves face to face with Rebecca herself. The lead operator, carrying state-of-the-art combat gear, never even saw the strike that disabled him. His teammates, reacting with professional speed, found their practiced responses useless against someone who had spent years perfecting the art of close-quarters combat. 3 targets neutralized, Rebecca reported calmly, zip-tying the unconscious operators. "Sarah, direct their backup team to Sector 4. Thomas, prepare for Phase 4 environmental adjustments." Throughout the complex, similar scenes played out. The cleaners, despite their training and equipment, found themselves constantly one step behind. Their communications, fragmented by interference from ancient electrical systems, prevented coordinated response. Their tactical formations, perfect for modern combat, became a liability in the confined spaces of the memorial's maintenance areas. "Commander," Ghost Team's leader transmitted, "we've identified their command element. 3 operators, heavily armed, moving toward the main vault. They're carrying specialized breaching equipment." Rebecca checked her tactical display. The command team's movement patterns suggested they had a secondary objective beyond the Medal of Honor transport. "Wilson, status on the real medals?" "Secure in Thomas's hidden vault," the veteran responded. "But Commander, you need to see this. We found specialized scanning equipment in their gear. They're not just here for the medals." The realization clicked. "They're mapping the entire facility," Rebecca concluded. "Every security response, every structural detail. This isn't just a theft, it's reconnaissance for something bigger." Her suspicions were confirmed when Sarah's voice came through with urgent news. "Commander, decrypting their communications. They're transmitting detailed structural data to an off-site location. This is part of a larger operation targeting multiple memorials. The command team's movements became clear. They were systematically documenting the memorial's defenses, creating a template for future attacks on similar sites. Their professional demeanor masked a deeper purpose: the systematic erasure of military history and honor. All units adjust target priorities, Rebecca ordered. Ghost Team, maintain pressure on secondary units. Wilson, have your veterans funnel their command element toward the East Wing. Thomas, prepare for full environmental control. The memorial's ancient systems responded to Thomas's touch, creating a carefully orchestrated pattern of shadows, sounds, and pressure changes that forced the cleaners into increasingly confined spaces. Their night vision equipment, designed for consistent conditions, became worse than useless in the shifting environmental patterns. They're getting desperate, Sarah reported, watching the thermal feeds. Command team is abandoning standard protocol, trying to force their way to extraction points. Rebecca moved silently through the maintenance tunnels, tracking the command team's progress. Their frustration was evident in their increasingly aggressive movements. These weren't just mercenaries. They were used to being the elite, the predators. Finding themselves outmaneuvered in what should have been a simple operation was destroying their professional composure. The final confrontation began when the command team, running out of options, attempted to breach the main vault. Their specialized equipment, worth millions, proved useless against the simple mechanical locks Thomas had installed decades ago. Targets in position, Ghost Team reported. Awaiting your order, Commander. Rebecca surveyed the scene through thermal imaging. The command team had finally made a fatal mistake, choosing a position that looked defensible on modern tactical displays, but was actually a carefully prepared trap. Thomas, initiate final sequence, she ordered. The elderly caretaker's fingers flew over his modified control panel, and throughout the vault area, carefully prepared systems activated. Ancient ventilation fans created disorienting acoustic patterns. Emergency lights cast confused shadows that fractured night vision effectiveness. Pressure changes disrupted the accuracy of motion sensors. The command team, realizing too late their vulnerability, attempted to retreat. But veterans who had spent decades memorizing every corner of the memorial were waiting at each escape route. Ghost Team operators, moving like shadows, covered any remaining angles. Rebecca approached the trapped commanders, her movement completely silent despite the challenging conditions. These were the leaders, the ones responsible for planning the systematic attack on military memorials across the country. Their arrogance in thinking they could desecrate these sacred spaces was about to cost them everything. You have no idea what you're interfering with, the lead commander spat, his professional demeanor cracking. This is bigger than just some medals. We're part of something. You're part of nothing, Rebecca cut him off, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who truly understood sacrifice. You're just thieves who thought you could erase history, but you forgot something crucial. Yeah? What's that? Another commander demanded, his hand inching toward a concealed weapon. The strength of a memorial isn't in its medals or monuments, Rebecca replied, moving with practiced precision. It's in the people who understand what they represent. What happened next was too fast for the security cameras to properly capture. The commanders, despite their training and equipment, found themselves systematically disabled by someone who had spent years perfecting the art of close-quarters combat in the world's most challenging environments. As Ghost Team moved in to secure the unconscious leaders, Rebecca's phone lit up with a final message. Operation successful. Similar teams neutralized at 3 other memorial sites. Network identified and contained. Well done, Commander. The morning sun broke through the memorial's stained glass windows, illuminating the aftermath of a battle that most visitors would never know had occurred. The cleaners had come with technology, training, and arrogance. They left with a harsh lesson about the difference between attacking a building and confronting the spirit it represented. The aftermath of the operation unfolded with practiced precision as federal agents swarmed the Arlington Memorial Plaza. Rebecca stood in the command center, watching as the cleaners' leaders were processed by authorities. Their sophisticated equipment, now useless, was being cataloged as evidence of a conspiracy that stretched far beyond simple theft. "Final count," Sarah reported, reviewing her screens. 28 operators captured, all their support personnel contained, no serious injuries on either side. She smiled slightly. They never even got close to the real medals. Detective Santos approached with a tablet displaying preliminary findings. "Their equipment is military grade, some of it classified. This wasn't just a criminal operation. They had serious backing." She scrolled through the data. Found something else too. Documents linking them to similar attacks on historical sites across Europe and Asia. Thomas wheeled over, his weathered hands still steady as he organized his maintenance logs. "The hidden vault worked perfectly," he said proudly, "just like it was designed to during the Cold War. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." Rebecca's phone buzzed with a message from her former intel contact. "Network exposed. Arrests happening across 6 countries. You didn't just stop a theft, you broke open an international operation targeting military historical sites." Wilson approached, accompanied by Dr. Harrison and the other veterans who had played such a crucial role in defending their memorial. "Found this in their command vehicle," he said, placing a hard drive on the table. "Complete tactical analysis of 15 other memorial sites. They were building a blueprint for systematic attacks." "More than that," Rebecca replied, studying the data. "They were trying to erase military history piece by piece. Start with physical artifacts, then move on to records, documents, anything that preserves the memory of sacrifice and service." Sarah's tablet lit up with news alerts. "It's already hitting the media. Veteran Memorial Conspiracy Exposed. International plot to erase military history thwarted. You're going to be famous, Commander." Rebecca shook her head. "No names. This isn't about individuals. It's about protecting what these memorials represent." Officer Chen entered with final security reports. "Plaza's clear. Ghost team's already gone, like they were never here. And the real Medal of Honor transport, safely delivered to its destination through Thomas's tunnels." The elderly caretaker smiled. "Those tunnels have been protecting important things since World War II. Nice to see them serving their purpose again." As federal agents continued their work, Rebecca walked through the memorial hall. The morning sun streamed through stained glass windows, illuminating the wall of heroes where her grandfather's name still stood proudly. The cleaners had tried to erase this history, thinking they were just attacking buildings and stealing medals. Instead, they had learned a crucial lesson about the true strength of places like Arlington Memorial Plaza. It wasn't in the marble walls or bronze plaques. It wasn't in the sophisticated security systems or armed guards. The real power lay in the people who understood what these memorials represented. The unbroken line of service and sacrifice that connected generations. "Commander," Thomas called softly, approaching with his logbook. "Found something you might want to see." He opened to a yellowed page showing a photograph from the plaza's dedication ceremony. "That's your grandfather there, helping lay the cornerstone. He knew what this place would mean to future generations." Rebecca studied the old photograph, seeing the same determination in her grandfather's eyes that she'd seen in the veterans who had helped defend his memorial. Some things, she realized, never changed. The will to serve, to protect, to honor those who came before. It was as strong now as it had been then. Sarah joined them, her tablet displaying updates from other memorial sites across the country. "They're all implementing new security protocols based on what we did here. Old-school methods combined with modern technology. The cleaners didn't just fail, they made every memorial stronger. Because they never understood what they were really attacking," Rebecca replied. "They saw buildings, medals, documents. They never saw the spirit these places protect." As the sun climbed higher, the plaza began returning to normal. Visitors would soon return, unaware of the battle that had been fought to protect not just this memorial, but the very concept of honoring military sacrifice. The cleaners had come with technology, training, and arrogance. They left with a harsh lesson about the difference between attacking a structure and confronting the ideals it represented. Rebecca's phone buzzed one final time. "Command says thank you." Memorial network secure. Some fights are worth any cost. Semper Fi, Commander. She looked around at her unlikely team, Thomas with his ancient systems and deeper understanding, Sarah with her modern technology and passionate dedication, Wilson and his veterans with their unwavering commitment, Santos and her officers with their professional courage. Together, they had done more than stop a theft. They had preserved something precious, the living connection between past sacrifice and future honor. As federal agents led the last of the cleaners away, Rebecca stood before the wall of heroes. The morning light caught her grandfather's name, and she smiled, knowing that somehow, somewhere, he would have approved of how they had protected his legacy. Some places were more than just stone and metal. Some fights were about more than just winning or losing. And sometimes, the most important victories were the ones that ensured the next generation would understand the true meaning of service, sacrifice, and honor. The Arlington Memorial Plaza buzzed with renewed energy 1 month after the thwarted attack. Rebecca stood near the wall of heroes, watching as visitors moved respectfully through the grounds. The memorial had changed subtly, not in its physical appearance but in the spirit of those who protected it. Thomas Wheeler rolled past, checking the newly upgraded security features that blended seamlessly with his vintage systems. "You know," he said, pausing beside her, "applications for volunteer positions have tripled since the incident. Seems everyone wants to help protect this place now." Sarah Chen approached with her tablet, now featuring a sophisticated monitoring system that combined modern technology with old-school reliability. "The network we established is expanding," she reported. 15 other memorials have adopted our hybrid security approach. Veterans at each site are being integrated into protection teams. "And the cleaners?" Rebecca asked, though she already knew the answer from her intelligence contacts. "Completely dismantled," Sarah confirmed. "Federal authorities found connections to radical groups trying to erase military history worldwide. Your stand here didn't just save our memorial. It exposed an entire network." Rebecca watched as Dr. Harrison led a group of school children through the memorial, his voice carrying clearly as he explained the significance of each name, each medal, each symbol. The children listened with rapt attention, understanding that they were learning about more than just history. "Commander," Wilson called, approaching with several other veterans. "Got some interesting news from my contacts. Seems other memorial sites are reporting suspicious activities. Nothing serious yet, but they're learning from what happened here," Rebecca finished. "Good. That's why we're establishing the network." The network had grown organically after the incident. Veterans, law enforcement officers, and security professionals working together to protect military memorials across the country. What started as a defense of one plaza had evolved into a movement. Detective Santos joined them, now officially liaison between local law enforcement and the memorial's security team. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.